Alrighty, thank you for tuning in again. In this video, we're just going to go over how I got into both McMaster and TMU midwifery, keeping in mind that this is my personal experience and the path to getting there is going to look different for every single person. So to jump right into it, how I actually got my interest in midwifery and realized that it was a profession is through the show called The Midwife. And I know a lot of people get their start and interest in midwifery from here, and I don't think necessarily that it's problematic if you keep in mind that it is a romanticized view of the profession, just like Grey's Anatomy or ER romanticizes the profession of being a doctor. I think if you keep in mind that it is not reality, you won't be disappointed when you actually enter the profession. So just using it as a jumping off point, I think it was a really good exposure for me because I hadn't heard of midwifery before that. So that's where I got into it. Even though it's kind of cliche. So before applying to midwifery programs in Ontario, I completed my high school diploma and I went into McMaster Health Science, which is a 4-year undergraduate degree at one of the universities that also has a midwifery program. I did apply to midwifery at McMaster straight out of high school, but I got rejected. And looking back, it was definitely the right call at the time. I've grown so much as a person, and I know that I'm going to make a better midwife now than I could have before. One thing to note, though, is that health sci specifically has a bit of a pre-med culture. And throughout my 4 years there, I definitely got sucked into the idea that if you didn't go to med school, it was kind of a failure of the degree. And I know I talked to some of my peers who felt the same way, so I wasn't alone in that. And it kind of took me the 4 years to unlearn that culture. And I don't blame the program at all. I know a lot of life science or like biology-based undergrad degrees have that sort of mentality. So it's not unique to the school or anything. But it did take me a long time to unlearn. And it kind of reminds me of the Taylor Swift lyric where she says, how do I know nothing at 22, but I knew everything at 18? Because I really had to reflect on who I was when I was 18 and so sure of myself. And I knew what I wanted back then, which was midwifery, is still what I wanted now. I just let other people's opinions kind of get the best of me. So yeah, I went back and I applied to midwifery. I knew that it was for me this time around and I felt a lot more passionate and true to myself. So enter the interviews, which were online because COVID kind of screws with everything. So for prepping, I did a lot of online practice questions, which just so happened to be med school based. There aren't a lot of midwifery specific ones, but there is a really great video on YouTube by Ellie Durant that I'll link in the description that has midwifery specific interview questions, and I found it to be a really helpful resource. Other than that, I wrote down a lot of my answers because I found it kind of awkward speaking one-on-one to my roommates who were quizzing me at the time. But looking back, definitely speaking them out loud is a better way to practice. It's more true to life. But for some reason, I found it a little embarrassing. So I wrote down most of my questions and I kind of regret doing that. But yeah, thanks, Jack, for calling, but kind of cut me off. Basically, I was just trying to say that I wish I practiced more in person and kind of got over my nerves, but live life with no regrets, and I got in, so don't change a thing. Another really important tip that I used when I was preparing for the interviews was to read the websites of the programs I was applying to and really understand the pillars of their program so that I could incorporate those into my answers. I think it's really interesting to make them university specific because then you know whether or not your answers will match the program philosophies and things like that. Also, you can see where your values like align with universities to see which one is the right fit for you. So I think that's really important and makes your answers stand out and show that you prepared a little bit, which is really crucial. So moving on to the next part, which was the supplemental application, I only had to complete one of them for TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly known as Ryerson University. And for McMaster, I didn't have to complete anything. It was actually a very straightforward application because I was a continuing education student since I got my undergraduate degree from there. They already had my transcripts and everything like that, so I didn't have to send them over, whereas I did have to send my transcripts over to TMU. But my top tips for the supplemental would just be to read it over many, many times. Give yourself time to reflect on what you wrote. So write something down and then give it a week, come back to it with fresh eyes and then read it over. So definitely prepare in advance if you have the time to do so. And then the next portion of the application is definitely the transcripts. Marks, the scary thing that everyone talks about, but kind of in a hushed way. And I struggled back and forth between whether or not I would share my marks, but I do think it's really informative. And if you come at it with a non-judgmental lens, either towards the person you're hearing it from or yourself, just remember to be kind to yourself, and marks aren't everything. And if you compare yourself to others, my mom always says you'll either end up sad or vain. So it's not really a great thing to do. So straight out of high school, I had a higher average, about 95. But then coming out of university, I had about a 91 or 92, depending on how they calculated their cumulative average for the program requirements. And although it dropped, it's different coming out of university than from high school. They also don't look at your marks in isolation. They definitely take context factors into account, whether or not you're working or you took the course over the summer or you had extenuating circumstances. So don't be too hard on yourself, and you can always retake a class or get tutoring or get whatever help you need to get those marks that you want. So the final two things that went into my application were research and volunteering. So the first piece, research, I was really lucky that in my undergraduate degree, there was a thesis research component built into the program. And because the research was built into the program, I didn't have to go searching for it outside of school time. So I really appreciated that they built that in. I was also really lucky to find a thesis in an area that I was actually interested in. It just so happened to be midwifery, and a lot of people I know were not so lucky. It just comes down to sending a bunch of cold emails, getting a lot of rejections from possible supervisors, and then finally finding one that fits with your schedule and fits with what you want out of your thesis, your education goals. And I had the most amazing thesis supervisor who also acted as a reference for me, which is a big part of why I think I was able to get into the program. And then the second part, volunteering. I've been volunteering a lot since high school, in hospital settings, in long-term care homes, in respite centers for people experiencing homelessness. And I would volunteer regardless because I love it, and I've had incredible learning opportunities throughout my volunteering. But I do recognize that both research and volunteering are definitely privileges, and I was able to experience those privileges. So I think it's important to note that not everyone is able to, and I think recognizing when you are able to and just appreciating it that much more is really important. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that when it comes down to it, it's really 50-50, 50% luck and then 50% everything else. The transcripts, the supplemental, the interviews, all of that. Hard pill to swallow is that there are only about 80 spots in all of Ontario. So definitely there's going to be some amazing future midwives that the province just misses out on. And this is definitely a call to expand enrollment because we need more midwives. But my best advice is to stay optimistic. And if you know midwifery is the path for you, just don't give up and reach out for the supports that you need. And at the end of the day, good luck to everyone. Let me know if you want me to expand on any of these topics. Getting 2 undergraduate degrees, for example, maybe something specifically for interview prep. If there's anything, just leave it in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.